Welcome to Lessons in Logic, video number 51, still in our unit on inductive logic. And this will be, I think, our second of three videos looking at informal fallacies. For the lower right-hand corner of the screen, I've selected this lovely sunrise picture from Zimbabwe, Matobo National Park. Let's attribute the picture to its source, MacVivo. And let's talk about the false dilemma fallacy and the false dichotomy fallacy. They're not the same thing. Now, I think we just went over a nice long list of informal fallacies, and I didn't even give you these two. These come up a lot. They're referenced a lot, and they're frequently treated as the same thing. I've done it myself, but that's a mistake. They're not the same thing. So let's see what they are. Now, this is my Ricochet post where I explain this. There's not a whole lot to say in this video. You could read this, but let's skip the Picard facepalm and let's skip the anecdote where I made a mistake. Where I describe a mistake I made. Let's go straight to the meat of this. There's no such thing as an official or perfect list of informal fallacies. There's no official or perfect system for categorizing informal fallacies. There's no such thing as an official or perfect list of names for the informal fallacies. However, it is possible to get a good definition of what an informal fallacy is, namely a fallacy that happens in part because of the content of an argument, not just the way we're reasoning about things, but also in part because of the things we're reasoning about. There are some argument patterns, some ways of reasoning that are often used in informal fallacies. There are some resemblances among the patterns that make it possible to categorize them. There are some very well-established names for some of the patterns, some other names that are somewhat less well-established, and there are a lot of different logic textbooks and critical thinking textbooks, which each of which has its own particular approach to informal fallacies. These textbooks vary in which lists they give. And of course, the longer the list, the more arguments you can apply it to, but the harder it is to remember everything. They have different systems for categorizing the patterns, and they don't always use exactly the same names for the patterns. Now, I do recommend this textbook, Power of Logic. Let's keep going. We are not talking about a problem that has an official or a perfect solution, but I can give you a better solution to the question. And I guess I should scroll up to where I describe my rookie mistake. The question is the false dilemma fallacy the same thing as the false dichotomy fallacy? The answer is no. And now I can give you a good answer to that question with some brief explanation. There are two different argument patterns that are often used in informal fallacies that involve an either-or statement. Fallacies that involve an either-or statement, informal fallacies, two different patterns, some similarities in the patterns, but not the same pattern. One we can call the false dilemma pattern, and the other we should call the false dichotomy pattern. Now, let's not get confused and have a merely verbal dispute as we defined it several videos back. Let's not get confused about the terminology. Let's look at the patterns first and then figure out what names to call them. And let's tentatively call them Frodo and Sam. The Frodo pattern is in arguments like this. You must disapprove of Trump's behavior or disapprove of Biden's behavior. Make up your mind. You must either approve of masks for COVID or of chloroquine. Masks are good, so chloroquine can go to heck. We have to drill more or do more green energy. The time to decide which one is now. We have to cut spending or else grow the economy to fight the national debt. It's easy to grow the economy, so let's just ignore the spending. So you hopefully see the pattern here. All these arguments under the Frodo pattern are either one thing or the other. Definitely one, so definitely not the other. But now look at this, the Sam pattern. Your only options are to vote for Hillary or for Trump. Hillary is bad, therefore your only option is to vote for Trump. You can be a patsy or a jerk. It's wrong to be a jerk, so be a patsy. Or you can be a patsy or a jerk. It's wrong to be a patsy, so be a jerk. Either you approve of sacrificing the economy to fight COVID, or you're in favor of doing nothing. Are you going to be a Christian, or are you going to be a nihilistic atheist? And I hope you see what's wrong with the Sam pattern arguments. Either one thing or the other, but definitely not one, so it's got to be the other. When actually you could maybe choose a third option. So in response to the Frodo arguments, people have made memes that say things like, why not both? Because sometimes you don't have to choose between two options. You can actually choose both. You could support masks and chloroquine. You could disapprove of Trump and Biden. You could drill more and do green energy. You could cut reckless spending and grow the economy to fight the debt. Do both of those things at the same time. Sometimes you can do two things at once, and an argument fallaciously ignores that possibility. But sometimes you can avoid two mistakes, or at any rate, since whether they're even mistakes is not really the issue here, sometimes it is a possibility to avoid both of two options. Sometimes it's improper to restrict the number of available options to two because there are other ones. You might, in 2016, have had the option of not voting for Trump or Hillary, vote for neither. You do have the option in life of not being a patsy and not being a jerk. It is possible to disapprove of sacrificing the economy to fight COVID and still be in favor of doing something. It is possible to be neither a Christian nor a nihilistic atheist. There are some other options out there. And there are lots of other options out there. So something is wrong with the Frodo arguments and something different is wrong with the Sam arguments. In one case, we are fallaciously saying you have to choose one of two when you could actually choose both. And in the other, we're fallaciously saying you have to choose one of two when actually you could choose neither. There's more choices available in some cases, and in other cases, you don't have to choose between them because you can choose both. They're not the same mistakes. Frodo arguments ask us to choose between only one of two options, and we can have both. Sam arguments ask us to choose which of the two options we can when we can actually reject both. The same argument could have both mistakes, like you must like Star Wars or else Star Trek. Star Trek is great, therefore you should hate Star Wars. That's making both mistakes, but figure it out for yourself why I say that's making both mistakes. So at this point, what I hope I've established well and clearly is there's two different argument patterns, the ones I'm calling Frodo and the ones I'm calling Sam. Frodo arguments tell us you have to choose one of two options, but not both, when you could actually choose both. Sam arguments fallaciously tell us you have to choose one of two options when you could choose neither. And an argument that commits one of those fallacies is not necessarily committing the other. And those are different fallacies. So there's two different argument patterns that are often used fallaciously. Not always. Sometimes you really do have a binary choice. Either vote for Trump or don't vote for Trump. That was certainly a binary choice for me in 2016. Either support chloroquine or don't support chloroquine. That's certainly a binary choice. Having no opinion on chloroquine is not supporting chloroquine. Oppose chloroquine or support chloroquine, no, there's a third option. There's have no opinion. But support chloroquine or don't, there's no way of avoiding choosing one of those. So not every argument that has these patterns is fallacious, but one is often fallacious, and the other one is also often fallaciously used. Not often fallacious, the pattern is often fallaciously used. So now all we have to do is figure out, what do we call them? Here's our Iron Man gif. Is it too much to ask for both? Addressing Frodo fallacies. And here's Dilbert's mom asking for more choices when you don't have to choose between two options because there needs to be a third option. All right, so which is called the false dilemma? Which is called the false dilemma fallacy? Which should be called false dilemma fallacy, and which should be called false dichotomy fallacy? Now, a dichotomy is a cutting or a dividing in two. A dilemma, in its traditional use, is a set of two options or two propositions. Now, these days, the word dilemma is sometimes used to just refer to a difficult situation, which is, well, frankly, it's an obnoxious and degenerate use of the term, and I wish it would stop. But I don't see how, even if we adopted that change, it would help. Just stick with the traditional use of the term. Dilemma is a set of two options. So, which arguments improperly cut or divide between two options? That's the Frodo arguments. That's the ones that say you can't have it both ways when maybe you actually can. And those are the ones we should therefore call false dichotomy fallacies. But which arguments improperly give us a set of two options, because there's also other options available? Those are the ones we should call false dilemma fallacies. So the right name for the Sam fallacy, the fallacy of saying you have to have one of these two options when there are other options available, That's false dilemma. The right name for the you have to have one of these options and not both fallacy, Frodo fallacies, that is false dichotomy. Now, false dilemma fallacy will probably be defined that way in any logic textbook. False dilemma has a very well-established meaning. Unfortunately, false dichotomy is not a term with a very well-established meaning. And sometimes the words are used synonymously, but not universally. Okay, if you use them synonymously, you're going to abandon the dictionary use of the word dichotomy, which is rarely a good idea. So consider this. You must support a future malaria vaccine, or at least support chloroquine. Keep in mind that chloroquine for malaria and chloroquine for COVID are two different issues. Maybe chloroquine for COVID's useful, maybe not, I don't know. Trying to think, what fallacy was it? Yes, I've seen some straw man fallacies against chloroquine for COVID. I don't think I've been able to identify an argument that wasn't, but never mind that. Chloroquine for malaria is very well established, except for possibly cases where the infectious agent is immune to chloroquine. Chloroquine's a great disease. My parents gave me chloroquine as a malaria prophylaxis when I was young in rural Zimbabwe, and it just tasted horrible. It was dreadful pill, but it's a good pill for preventing malaria or treating malaria. Anyway, you must support a future malaria vaccine, or at least support chloroquine. This sentence is not telling me that I can support both. But if you want to call it a fallacy on the grounds that it leaves out mosquito nets, that's fine with me. This would make it an inappropriate reduction of choices, an improper set of two options, telling us you have to have one of these two when there's a third way. That would make it a false dilemma, but it doesn't falsely separate the two options. It's not a dichotomy at all. It's not cutting anything, and dichotomy means cutting. A dichotomy is a cutting or a dividing. A division into two parts. And so I wonder, why would you want to label something an improper separation if it does not improperly separate? Which is why I say false dichotomy fallacy is not the same thing as false dilemma fallacy. That's a silly use of the names. But the really important thing, actually, once again, since we don't care about merely verbal disputes, I'm telling you which names I think are best. But it doesn't matter that much if you want to use the wrong names, just so you're clear. No, you won't be. I mean, really, unless you can persuade everyone who speaks English to abandon the dictionary and use your use of the terms, it's not going to work out. These are better names. These are correct names I'm giving you here. I'm giving you a good argument here for using the terms in this way. But what really matters, though, is that these are two separate argument forms, and it's better not to confuse them by whatever names we call them. And if you wanted to stick with Frodo and Sam, cool, be my guest. I don't care. If you want to call them Frodo fallacies and Sam fallacies instead of false dilemma, Frodo fallacies and Sam fallacies instead of false dichotomy and false dilemma patterns, respectively. That's cool. I don't care what you call them very much. The important thing is they're not the same argument pattern. That's the really important thing. Anyway, let's see. Where was I? Good. I don't think we need the last two paragraphs. Frankly, I think we're done. So there are some arguments that improperly reduce our options to two when there are more options available. And there are some arguments which improperly, meaning fallaciously, some arguments which fallaciously tell us to choose one of two options, but not both, and we can choose both. These are not the same kind of argument pattern. The one that reduces our choices to two when there are other options available, that's the one you should call false dilemma fallacy. And the one that improperly tells you to choose one or two, but not both when you could have it both ways, that is the false dilemma fallacy. That's the better name for it. Okay, enough of this. Thanks for watching. We'll talk about arguments from ignorance, I think, in the next video.